ago.
Is that right?
He is,
Dude,
he's a full-fledged
Really
dad.
cold.
you're in it, huh?
He's a full-fledged dad.
My life is over now.
This
but
is what-
it's better.
This is what Beatrice put together. I haven't totally looked through it, but I think it includes everything.
Okay.
So if there's things you're interested in, and it gives the flight and the hotel and
Okay. I think that might have been
I'm giving
giving
you
some of that, but this is perfect.
okay. Now I'm gonna give this to everyone. Okay, tonight.
like after speaking to a thing that was bouncing.
Hello, hello.
Exactly what it is. Oh, trying to figure it all out. So we know what shit. Yes, indeed.
Yes, I understand that feeling completely. I mean, whatever. Whatever. You have a nice wife, so I don't think that's right.
Good to go? Thank you. Okay, welcome, everybody. Today is Tuesday, March 21st, not January 21st, 2023. And this is the Cottonwood Heights City Council work session agenda. Meeting, rather. The first item on our agenda today is a review of our business meeting this evening. We'll begin with the pledge of allegiance from our Assistant Chief of Police, Paul Brenneman. Tonight, we have our city council reports. We'll dedicate 3 minutes to each. We will have a citizen comment period, and then we have 4 action items, legislative action items to consider as a council to vote on this evening. First is a consideration of resolution 2023-11, approving entry into a consulting agreement for environmental support and conceptual design services. At this under a staff report, so we're not going to discuss it right now. The second item tonight is consideration of resolution 2023-12, approving entry into a consulting agreement for environmental document services for a pedestrian crosswalk. That also is fall under a staff report, and we won't discuss it now. 5.3 for this evening is consideration of resolution 2023-13, amending and restating the policy for electronic meetings with the city's public bodies. And I'll have Tim, why don't you discuss what that is specifically?
Yeah, it's really basic. HB 22 that was passed, one of the legislative bills, basically dictated these changes, and it requires it makes changes on the anchor location that was originally set by Governor Herbert at the time. And so we removed that. And then also if there's a unanimous, except for a unanimous vote, public body has to conduct electronic meetings by taking a roll call vote, which is basically what we do now. And so these are just technical changes that are required by state code, and we're recommending approval.
Great. Questions, comments by the council? Pretty straightforward. Okay. The last item for this evening, consideration of resolution 2023-14, approving an interlocal agreement with Salt Lake County for municipal election services. So this is what we do every election cycle. And so I don't know if Tim or Maria, does Maria want to talk about it? Do you want to talk about it?
We'll talk about it as part of the
that is part of the work session.
yeah, that's part of the work.
I apologize.
Yep.
Didn't note that down there. Okay, perfect. And then the last item is the consent calendar. And just a reminder, that's a heavier lift. That's the legislative work session for February 23rd, the city council retreat of January 31st, and then the city council work session, CDRA work session, and city council business meeting from February 21st and March 1st. So a lot of meeting minutes that we'll approve for that consent calendar. Okay, item 3 on our agenda includes 4 different staff reports, and we're going to start with a presentation to the council on something that I think is really, really important. I hope and it has the potential to affect our city. And so we're going to turn the time over to both our Public Works Director, Matt Shipp, and the Police Chief Emergency Management Manager, Paul Brenneman, to give us a little bit of our plans on the spring runoff and some of the potential flooding issues that exist at this time. So, Tim, did you want to say anything before that?
Yeah, I'll just say one thing, and we'll go into that. There's been a lot of proactive work that's occurring, and we've had meetings that we'll talk about that Mayor Wickers was a part of yesterday and other meetings. But we've got a lot of things that we're working on, and appreciate the efforts of our staff, Matt and Paul, especially in all their efforts. There's a lot to think about, and we'll talk about that today. So,
First thing we'd like is you to pass a resolution canceling the runoff for 2023. I'm sure they'll follow that. So thanks for the opportunity to come before you. A lot of what I'm going to present, at least in the initial slides, is based upon a briefing I had last week at the emergency manager's monthly meeting. It was presented by the National Weather Service. So this is the data that I'm about to present is based upon that briefing and provided by them. So go ahead and go to the next one. One more, Maria. Thank you. These are historical data. Oh, go back. This historical data, October through February 2023, and its departure from the norms of 81 through 2010. The darker the color, the lower the temperature. This is basically a recap of our temperatures for the last winter period, which should have ended yesterday, but it hasn't. The one on the right just shows basically precipitation during that same period of time. So the darker the colors on both, the colder it is, or the more precipitation we have, and that's statewide. So go ahead. This is a precipitation through October through February currently. So this is the 2023 report. Once again, it just shows statewide we've had above average precipitation, above 10% in most parts of the state, and some it's the record wettest on record. Go ahead, next slide. This slide represents snowpack as of that date. It was the 11th of March, and this is statewide. If you look at the 177, or excuse me, go ahead to the next slide. I'm sorry. That was statewide. So this is the water equivalency. If you look at the purple top rate or purple top of the graph, that shows historical records. If you show the black line, that shows this year to date in the state of Utah. Go ahead, Maria. This slide represents the current Salt Lake County. Yep, Maria, can you back up one slide? I'm having a tough time. It's not showing the whole slide, so I'm having a tough time reading.
Sorry.
Okay, so this, I believe this slide represents countywide. The median, and if you go ahead and fast forward to the next one, Maria, one more slide. Big Cottonwood Creek.
Oh,
This is the same graph. That's fine. We can go from there.
Okay.
So once again, historical data, you see we peaked on March 1st, well above the historical data. And we've now taken a little bit of a decline, but that doesn't include this last week's storms.
So 11 days of storms and more to come, right?
Yeah, more to come. And we just
Right.
passed historic, I was told the day at the Brightness passed their all-time record for snowfall. So water, and we'll talk about water equivalency rate. They're still slightly below the all-time high. Go ahead, the next one, Maria. So this is Little Cottonwood Creek, and this is one that causes me the most concern because we've had historical flooding on Little Cottonwood Creek. Big Cotton, we'll talk a little bit more about Big Cottonwood in a minute. But we're at the Snowbird site, we're 178% of normal. Go ahead, Sarah. Same graph, we're well above historical highs for this time, right? Go ahead, next slide. Next slide, please. All right, this is what we look at when we're trying to forecast and realize this is not a science. It's just simply looking at historical data. They look at the seasonal temperature outlook from April, May, or for April, May, and June of this year is to be above normal temperatures. It's in the low range of above normal, but it's still above normal. Go ahead. This is the seasonal precipitation outlook, and it's for below normal precipitation in the areas affected that will affect us. So higher than normal temperatures, lower than normal precipitation. One is good, the other is not so good. So we don't want the weather to heat up too much, but we do want
a little bit less precipitation during that same time.
that same time period, April through June. So there's a redeeming value there. There's less precipitation. Go ahead, Maria. This is the gentleman that provided it. He's a senior service hydrologist with the National Weather Service. Glenn Merrill, we have his contact info. We can reach out at any point in time, any day of the week. They have a staff, they staff their weather center 7/24, not with him, but with available resources should we have a need. So we'll be in contact with them as we get closer to the anticipated flooding. All right, water year comparison. This is taking the information from the Snowtail site in Little Cottonwood Canyon. 2010, when we had the historical flooding here in the city. 74 inches of snow depth, water equivalency rate of 25.9 inches. 2011, the year following, where we were concerned, but we didn't have the same level. We didn't have flooding issues that year. And I think it was because Salt Lake County Flood Control did great improvement to our stream channels. So 134 inches, 53 inches of water. 2022 last year, 79, 28.7. And now we're at all-time highs of 150 and 58. So and this data was as of a couple hours ago today. Any questions to this point in time about what we talked about? It was just data for your review. I would tell you the previous slide. I'm hoping it suggests the same outcome we had in 2011 versus 2010, but you never know. And it all is about how the snow is going to come down, how quickly it heats up, how quickly we get snow off the mountain before the extreme heat comes, right? And number two, on that same concern is we typically don't see runoff until mid-May till early June. Historically, that's been the data. Doesn't mean it will happen during that period of time. It just means that's when it typically happens up here. All right, go ahead to the next slide, please. Things we've done so far. Myself, Matt, the mayor, and Tim met with Salt Lake County flood control personnel, including Kate Bonker, who runs that division. We met on Monday afternoon and had a very robust conversation. Mayor, Tim, would you like to offer input about what we discussed, or feelings or perceptions?
So my council report's gonna include some of the discussion that we had. Mostly, I think the county, along with our emergency management team headed by Chief Brenneman, are prepared in multiple areas. And so I was actually really excited to see everything that they have done, have planned to do, walking, creeks, clearing debris. We talked about an education campaign. They're going to mail to every single household. The county is a mailer to talk to anybody that's along a creek bed to not let debris get too close to the stream. I asked about, can we follow up with door hangers? They have actual door hangers they will give us that we're going to then plan to deliver and put on every single door, saying the same thing. Please do not let your debris get close to the beds, because the debris, what happens is the debris gets sucked in and then it clogs up, areas, which then causes the water to flood over the bank. So one of the things that I asked from our Chief Brenneman and the county is, I am always I would say I'm an optimist most of the time, but I also want to be prepared. And so I asked for a worst case scenario written plan. And that means, that would entail something like continued rain. By the way, rain in the spring is not going to be our friend from this point on, but a cold spring with continued moisture coming down, continued rain and snow in the mountains, let's say through April, mid-May, and May. And if we hit a sudden, in early June, late May, where the temperatures go to 80, 85, 90 on a consistent basis, which can happen, extreme amounts of water are going to come down in a fast fashion from our mountains. One of the things that they mentioned in this meeting is the south and north slopes of Little Cottonwood Canyon have never seen the recorded snow depths that we have right now. They were way past where those have ever been. Unfortunately, there's a lot of unknowns. Everything could transpire and be just great. And that's obviously what we're hoping for. I want us to be prepared in case of potential disaster. And that includes education to our residents along streams, but everybody else, we've learned Ferguson Canyon and Depp Canyon, that there's some issues that can be there that, dependent upon what we've talked about, some of the circumstances. And so mostly, and I'll repeat this again in our council report, I want the council to know, our citizens to know that we're taking this very, very seriously. And we are led by the right man in Paul Brenneman. He has as much experience as anybody. He's been through, like he said, the other floodings that we've participated in or that have happened. So anyway.
Mayor, just to emphasize a couple of things, hope is not a plan. We're going to plan for this. But I also want you to understand that Mother Nature controls what happens, not us. There are risks along those creek beds, plain and simple, and we can't mitigate all that risk. What we can do, and to touch base on what you were saying, is we're asking, and we've already put out information on our websites and through social media for our public who live along those water courses to pay attention when they see things that drop into the stream beds, to call Solid County Flood Control to report that issue. If we can get that stuff out before the heavy runoff comes down, we're that much better off. Councilperson, you had a question?
Yes, in District 4, I can certainly attest in my immediate neighborhood, in the Golden Hills, Kings Hill Drive area. If culverts are backed up coming down out of Deaf Smiths, it isn't necessarily the greatest danger to the homeowners who have the creek flowing through their backyard. According to residents who have lived there for 45 and 50 years, they tell me that when the culverts get backed up, the water begins to flow down the streets. And so a resident such as the Grace family, they live in where a T in the road comes down off of its Escalade, it's perpendicular to Kings Hill. And the water can stream down there and hit those houses that run along Alpin Way, in essence, parallel to Wasatch Boulevard. So I would be very interested if you could come out and look and maybe talk to some of these residents in these key areas, because Deaf Smiths Canyon stream runs through my backyard, yet I don't even have to carry flood insurance because the creek area is so deep, and the areas prone for flooding are actually my neighbors to the north that on Golden Hills Avenue.
Sure.
So there's some unexpected situations there that I think we need to.
Let me ask, is I've been learning, in addition to my experience, how those flood control planes or how that stormwater drain system is set up. And I'll let Matt address how they're designed to work. Once they're overwhelmed with water, the design is a certain thing. So I'll let you pick off on that more.
So things like escalate Alpin, those are a concern, especially where they are, but typically just in a lot of locations, your storm drains are not built to handle monster floods. That's a real scientific term, right? It's not built to handle those. What happens is if the inlets get inundated, they may not even be plugged, they could just be inundated. And when that happens, the streets are actually designed to carry the 100-year flood. So when that happens, the streets will start to flood. And you see it like in Salt Lake, they even have one road there I call Flood Street, if I believe, right, if I'm correct, or maybe it's St. George, I saw it. But they're built to carry those storms. That's why we like to build them up. And the road, everything slopes up. And so, but there are places up in this neck of the woods that certainly do present challenges based on the topography. Water coming down. And like Paul said, once it starts coming down, we are chasing a lot of things. So we'll have to see where it takes us.
That's exactly what we're looking for, though. I think Councilmember Burrell.
What I would tell you is that in those circumstances, they're going to need to sandbag those likely access points into the residences. So they would sandbag window wells, they would sandbag doorways, they would sandbag the garage access, and they'll want to be prepared to do that. And that's something that they would be responsible for. But I'll be happy to meet and talk to people. Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of elderly people, such as the Graces. Sorry about my phone going up. And I think they're a good example of, whatever we can do to, talk to them in advance. They may need help with the sandbagging because again, they're older, a lot of older people in those neighborhoods. But I so appreciate that you're, on top of these things, and I just want to make sure that we, again, are examining almost street by street where there's this potential for the T's in the road to these houses to take the brunt of an unusual.
If I may add and we've been getting this out on social media. I know you're going to talk in all of our communications channels. We're letting people know about the storm drain and if they see issues with any backup, at least right now, to let us know or you clear those out. But we're also, Matt with his crew is doing street by street on all the storm drains and going regularly. We're doing that almost daily now, aren't we, Matt?
Yeah, they're out a
Daily.
couple hours a day cleaning.
Couple hours a day cleaning the grates, making sure that we've got that capacity there. The other thing I mentioned about our meeting, what the mayor said, as well as you, Assistant Chief, is it amazes me the expertise we obviously have in our city with Matt and Paul. The county has been doing a lot of work, and they know our city areas and issues very well. I was very impressed by, they knew exactly where the points of our city are, where there could be concerns on the creeks. And so it's great to have this collaborative effort working together, which is something that the mayor emphasized. It's an important thing, and there's a lot of work that's been going on, not just in the last couple of weeks, but for quite some time.
And Paul, I was gonna mention to Matt, I have the newsletter it's gonna come out in April. I've been talking to some of the residents, and I've been here for 33 years. And we've been through some of these things. It's great to hear how much information has come out about the drains and different things. And I was down on State Street for the 83 flood, the State Street River, we deemed it. And a lot of those storm drains filled with silt because of the runoff. And it's gonna be a fun one if this heats up too late. And we've had years, and I used to text or show pictures to Paul about kayaking down a huge, I think Payette River or something, but I put it there and said, hey, water's great, come on in, type thing. But it is scary when that creek, and I've walked up that creek, we had more limbs come down this year than I can remember in many years because of those wet, heavy snows. And I think the county I'm hoping a week ago, there was a lot still in the creek, but I think they're probably in motion to get rid of as much of that as you can.
They are. So what I need is a collaborative effort, not just between us and the county, but our
Residents.
citizens.
Reticence, yeah, in fact.
Let me tell you what I really need.
What's that?
So one of the access points that was brought up with Cape Montcor is access to those backyards. One, we need our citizens to report that and do their part. If they see something that's in the stream right now, it's easy to remove it, take it out, right? Their property goes to the midpoint of the creek, right? Yeah. So you see it, take it out. If they have a tree that's already leaning and about to go over, they need to report that to Salt Lake County Flood Control. If when the water starts to flow, by the way, it's not in Little Cottonwood, it's less than a second flow, which is
it's a trickle.
It's a trickle.
Yeah.
So we need them to be actively engaged and not wait till the last minute to report those types of things. If there's leaves or if there's tree limbs in there now, please report it to Salt Lake County. And then they need to give Salt Lake County access to their backyard, work with them. Otherwise, we will have that.
And there's some access is deemed access right on the east side of the bridge down at Crestwood. There's some areas that are already deemed to go through. The rudders have an access that is actually there.
Sure.
And so, but like I say, the neighbors, the wonderful thing is they're going up and down that creek too.
Perfect.
And there's a lot of trees that have a tendency to bend right over there. And when they start hitting the water, if it gets high enough, they dip down into that, then they get ripped off.
Sure.
And they've been doing a good job, but this is going to be a big year.
We need to, like I said, we need to be a plan for that, but we need our citizens to help.
Now is the time to get the stuff out of the river.
It is.
Yeah.
And
Now
we
is the
can't-
time to get those trees taken care of.
And we can't put equipment in, so Salt Lake County Flood Control is not responsible for trees on your property unless it's imminent, they're going to fall. They're not gonna take them out, they just can't. But what they need to do is the access, they can't put equipment in the river channel. They have to access it from somebody's property to reach in and grab it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So they can't just put a track hoe down and start collecting stuff in the middle because there's rules and regulations about that. So we need to be careful with that. Let me move on so we don't run too long. We're already actively engaged in purchasing of material. So Matt's done a great job with sandbags, and they're bringing sand in and preparing for these things. And we're doing this earlier than we've ever done it in my experience. So we're prepping. Anything you want to add on that, Matt?
No, like Paul says, this week, I just have 2 trucks just running full time, bringing in sand to the yard. And Paul's going to get into a few more things here in a little bit, but sand is becoming a hot commodity. That's why we're jumping on it right now. As he said, typically we don't start looking at this till mid-May, June. And we start our process, like I said, in April to get going, but we've been doing that. We've been ordering and we've been actually filling some. Council member Burrell, you brought up something I wanted to comment on. We do have an elderly population. We do have that. And when people come to the yard, we're happy to work with the elderly folks, load them up, load the bags where we can. We're also requesting it to be a service project. So church groups, scout groups, just neighborhood groups, anyone can come in and just fill bags for people and just have them there. But really getting word out and through our stuff with your neighbors, because we are, and I'm not going to make an excuse, I'm just going to state a fact, we're a small group and we can only be so many places at so much. And I have to send them out 2 by 2 as well. So that narrows us down to 6 people, 6 crews out trying to chase problems. So having, get with your neighbors, and we'll say this for the record, get with your neighbors, people that might need that. We're happy to do things, but we're limited. We are limited. And but we have supplies coming in. We have the supplies, and Paul's going to talk a little bit more about some of the things we're doing.
So then I'll put out through my network for those volunteer organizations through our emergency preparedness districts, asking them to do that. But once again, I don't have the resources to do that for them. We just don't. And so we're hoping the neighbors that are going to be impacted will volunteer to do that, but we'll put that word out and hopefully they respond.
If there's somebody that does have a large amount of green or brush or something in their area, Wasatch Front also does a green trailer rental. That's very,
Correct.
it's like $45 or something like that for 3 days. And so they don't have to worry about necessarily hauling it away. If they've got a large amount, they can get one of those out there and delivered and get it out and get it removed.
Gotcha. Maybe we can have Lindsay put that along with the newsletter that's coming out, that resource. So we've got sandbagging parties that are coming up. Historically, we've done that in the past. We've been very successful. The 3 locations we've used in the past, along with some local neighborhood locations, were St. Thomas More, the church, Councilman Peterson, your church on Forest Bend, and the LDS Chapel on about 15th East and the Stake Center there.
Road.
So they're all scheduled. So our first one kicks off this Saturday. It's on Forest Bend. Brian Green is the precinct leader for emergency preparedness up there, and he's organized it. We're delivering sand on Saturday, or excuse me, sand on Friday. The party is on Saturday. So they're going to be up there. And if anybody wants to join in, they're welcome to.
Let me add something real quick.
Sure.
So we've had residents ask and others about the sandbag material. So the county let us know that so the actual material is called woven polyethylene. And they have told us that actually it's still plastic, but it's actually more biodegradable, they said, than burlap. It breaks down fairly quickly. And in their determination, it is the best material that they can use that will not hurt the environment. So there, I
If
asked
it gets
them,
into the stream,
yes,
hopefully it gets picked up.
hopefully, exactly, 100%
And
right.
gets disposed of.
100% right. I've asked for those talking points to be sent to us so that we have the science behind that, and they're going to send that to us.
And when I
So-
pick those up, when you go down and you find some, they fall apart. You have to pick them up in pieces. So they are degrading fairly quickly.
Well, the problem with plastic, as we know, is that it shreds, but it doesn't biodegrade. So I'll be real interested in the data that they send, and I would love to see that appear as an article in our next newsletter so that residents that don't understand that can gain a bit more scientific, because I certainly am not aware of any kind of plastic-based, that will I may be totally wrong, but I think that would be a really good article in our next newsletter to
Agreed.
quell those concerns. Thank you.
All right, so we have the 3 locations. First one kicks off at Forest Bend this weekend. On the 14th, the Stake Center will kick off. That one's a big group. They're looking at 3 shifts, 90 people total over the course of 6+ hours. And then St. Thomas More, I'm still waiting to see what kind of numbers they're going to provide, but historically, they've been a great resource. They've provided a lot of that. They're on April 22nd. It'll be on the same day as shakeout, so they're gonna do it in conjunction with shakeout. So those 3 locations are in progress. We're hoping to get 6,000-7,000 bags filled out of those 3 locations, which will be very helpful. But the concept there is that people that fill bags can take bags, but we're asking them to leave the bags there, and they're strategically located in the areas we anticipate needs. Once there's a need, Matt's group will distribute those bags to those specific locations. The other thing I would tell you is that we don't have the resources, nor once the bags are taken by a citizen, they belong to the citizen. We're not going to pick them up from them. If they are not consumed and they're left on pallets at the staging locations, we'll pick those up and dispose of them. Does that make sense? So we just don't have the resource to pick them up off the riverbank or from somebody's driveway. Now, we have in the past left the pallets, and if they'll restack them on the pallets at the tactically deployed locations, we'll then remove them that way. We just don't have the resources to pick them up and stack them. So
Paul mentioning about resources, the PVC contraptions that help load it up. How many of those do we have?
talking to Danny, I was told about 20.
Yeah.
So we'd have 2 for those bigger up Creek Road, that.
Oh, you're gonna have
We'll
8
have
on
8 at
Saturday.
each one.
Okay, so it's not gonna be slowed down much. We can,
No,
when we get a big group going, we can really burn through.
and I hope that's the case. What the contraption is, it's a piece of wood that has 6, how big of tubes? Are they 8-inch or 6-inch tubes?
They're 8-inch,
8-inch tubes.
18-inch tall.
And what you basically do is you turn them upside down, you put the bag on, turn the machine back upside, and you just fill it with sand, pull the machine out, tie it, and stack them, and you just repeat. And so what they found in the past, though, is about 2 hours worth of that is about all you can handle. So that's why the stake center is going to do the 3 shifts. So,
Perfect.
okay, and
And you
so
get more consistently filled bags that way.
that's the key. And we don't fill them full. We
You
want
don't
them
fill 'em
2/3
full.
full because that stacks better and
They tie better.
And the tube is
tie better.
perfect. The tube is the
Yeah.
perfect size for a full bag or a
for a 2/3
correct
2/3 bag,
properly
that?
filled
The
bag.
correct amount.
the correct
Yeah,
amount.
the properly filled bag.
The sand is good too. If you have a sandbox you want to fill up after we're done. It's good for sandboxes.
The cats are excited in our neighborhood.
All right, this Public Works, Matt, are already get on this, the Public Works sandbagging program, they're gonna kick it off on the first week of April, run it for 2 weeks, and then we can adjust if we need it more. That's held at the Public Works yard. You come, fill up the bags you want, take them away. We'd also ask you fill up a few for other people and leave them so that people that show up and don't have the ability to fill them themselves can take bags.
We are, Paul, if I can interject,
Sure,
we
please.
are asking for ID on this program. It's a resident only. Just, I mean, we love our neighbors, but we have to kind of keep our resources where we can. And it'll be after hours. We'll have staff there. And if it gets enough, we may just open up on, we're not planning Saturday and Sunday yet. But if we need to, if we get enough interest, we'll open on Saturday and Sunday as well.
Informational outreach, city website, we've already talked about that, social media. We're also making a push for stream bed awareness because it's not just the sandbagging and the flooding concerns, it's the person safety along those creek beds. You joke about us, tubing that or kayaking that.
Yeah.
We see people in the river
I
doing
know.
exactly that. And we get reports of people that have disappeared. Come to find out they got out of the creek and somebody didn't see them get out. So it's truly a drain on manpower for both with us and UFA. Because once we get that report, you
can't ignore it.
you can't, and you have to marshal a whole lot of resources to address that issue, and it's big resources.
But every flood year, we have a dog that might get too close to it, and then as a pet owner, you want to jump in and get
That's
that.
a problem.
And we've lost people. We know we've lost people in Little Cottonwood Creek.
Yeah, and it's so cold that the minute you go in, you might think you're okay. 1, the force of the water, and 2, the cold takes you like that.
Yeah.
So the minute you go down, you're done.
That's actually a big concern for me. I brought it up in our conference of mayors meeting last week that hopefully we can coordinate a safety stay away from the creek campaign, because like you said, Paul, I mean, the force of the water that could come down, that has to come down this year, is going to be, have.
You roll rocks the size of Volkswagens down that creek, and you hear it. Doug, you've heard it. I
Yeah,
hear
you
it all
hear
the
it
time.
roll all
They're
night.
loud. So,
But it's an attractive nuisance, they say, in the insurance world, and it is fascinating. But people get too close and those edges, they can break off and slough off, and that's where a lot of people don't
it
realize.
really is.
Yeah.
So the next part of that is floodplain assessment. It goes back to what we're talking about pre-planning. Historically, it's been Milne Lane, Lower Crestwood, the Crestwood Park area. And basically, it's west of Highland Drive, although there are concerns east of Highland Drive. So, and we have Jeff Smith and we have Ferguson that are also can be concerning. Looking at those things, we monitor those things and we adjust accordingly. Sheltering resources. One of the things that come to mind is we talked about where do we send these people because it's such a small group of individuals that will be impacted by the flooding. It can be seriously small, as small as a couple of neighborhood homes that can be affected. We don't have large floodplains to flood, an entire community. But one of my big concerns is the care center, the Truwood Care Center at Union Park and the river. I've already been in contact with them. This county is going to put up what they call a muscle wall, which because whoever designed that and authorized that plan didn't do a very good job. They're at high risk for flooding. Not that we'll have to move people, but they would lose day use in their cafeteria facilities. So we're already working with them to plan for that, as well as Salt Lake County. The muscle wall is a portable wall they will put up that gives them a level of protection on that south side or north side of the creek. We'll also deliver sandbags, which is Matt's group is doing, so that they have resources should they need them. And what they would be doing is sandbagging their doors and their window wells to access into the building, not necessarily the creek, although they do some of that limited as well. Sheltering. Red Cross will provide sheltering service through the form of a check or payments to an individual who is displaced. And typically it requires flood in the primary living portion, not the basement where they don't live, but the primary living portion that is 18 inches deep or above the electrical outlets. And that would be a one-time check, and it's not a ton of money, but it would help them get temporary shelter for whatever period of time. The Red Cross doesn't release those numbers. It's private, but they do have an assessment team that would come out and do that for our residents. So I don't anticipate needing a mass sheltering location. So we wouldn't open up the rec center to house hundreds of people, but we would hope that they would have resources if their home is actually impacted by flooding. Does that make sense? So we do have some access there to shelter. State mitigation response funding. We were notified literally this morning of access to some monies from the state. Governor Cox made $5 million statewide available. The interesting thing is that Salt Lake County EM heard about it on Monday. They contacted us this morning. Tim heard about it through a UFA meeting, and I've been in touch with EM all day. We have to have a request in by, 5 o'clock today on what we would like. That request is in. What we asked for was additional sandbags. The state is buying 2 million sandbags. We've asked for a share of those, but more importantly, Matt's already done his job. He's pre-planned for this, and we have 13,000 plus sandbags that are on site already. We've asked them to reimburse us for those purchases. Number two, we've asked for sand. We've got about a $15,000 projected need for sand. And this is all based on Nat's figures. We've asked for them to provide us funding to buy that sand because we haven't purchased it already, although we're in process. Number three, we've asked for monies to do an outreach program to our citizens, including a direct mailer that we control that runs about $6,700. We asked for that amount. We've asked for overtime funding, which is really, I couldn't pin them down on will that be authorized or not, but we've asked for 100 hours of civilian staffing time, 200 hours of public works time, and 100 hours of police officer time to be funded for overtime above and beyond our normal duties. So we've asked for that request. And then we've asked for, one of my biggest issues is tracking volunteer hours and volunteers period on site. And I've asked, this county has a program that they're looking at purchasing, they would give us access to, and I've asked to be involved in that software program that would allow us to track those volunteers. If I don't get that, then we track it the old fashioned way on a pad and paper and name, etc. So Matt, what else do you want to add?
I'll just let everyone know, I heard Paul asking these questions earlier this afternoon, and it's done, so that's great.
Thank you.
I was in that UFA meeting this morning and came to Tim and said, hey, Tim, there's an opportunity to apply for some funds. He said, oh, it's already done, Mayor. So thank you.
Just logistically, when we talk about sandbags as you get this information out. The creeks are going to do what the creeks are going to do. They've done a lot of work on them with the county and they are, you know, like Paul said, hope is not a plan, but we have to have some hope, right? The sandbag, when you're thinking about sandbags and as you get information out to your neighbors and your districts and things of that nature, remember the sandbags are best utilized, like Paul has said, window wells, doors, things of that nature. You can get a lot of bang for your buck protecting those. It takes thousands upon thousands to line a creek line. And even then, if your neighbor doesn't do it above you, it can still come around and go. So utilizing the bags at strategic locations is the important thing here. So as you talk to people, these bags, when we say 15, 20,000 bags, it seems like a lot. If we had them in one spot, it's great, but we don't. So just utilizing them in the right locations. And that's where we need to kind of focus that.
And if you have a house that they know either historically is at risk or they believe it to be at risk, now is the time to get the sandbags, have them ready to deploy around the window wells, around the doorways, so they can simply be put into place, not have to locate bags, pick up bags, transport bags, do those kinds of things. That's what I have. Mayor Tim, what else?
Thank you. No, but I think that's a lot of information, but I hope you all will feel good that we are doing everything we can. We've got great experience. Chief Brenneman and Matt and we're trying to be as prepared as possible. So
Temper expectations, please. Mother Nature is a cold person.
Well, I actually
Things
have,
can
I
happen.
have a quote on that. It's
Please.
not that Mother Nature is out to get you. It's just that she doesn't care. She has her own agenda.
And we're gonna leave it at that because Mother Nature's gonna do what Mother Nature's gonna do.
Yep.
Yeah.
So
perfect. Okay, thank you. Appreciate that in-depth report. So I had the next item under staff reports is a like we mentioned before, the Stark County election agreement discussion. And I'm gonna have our city manager gonna keep address that, and Maria might help as well. So I'm in charge of this.
Yeah, so you, just to go over some of this, what I was planning on doing is for 20 minutes, just reading it word for word, if that's okay. It's only like 10 pages, but I won't do that. But what it does is it outlines all of the obligations and the agreement points that we have with the county on all of the aspects of the election. The attachments include the election costs, which you've seen before. We'll talk in the future, but it outlines all of these things and the administrative process for the elections. And so a very important document, important with what they do in administering these elections for us. And I don't want to take too much thunder away from Maria. I'll let you share any additional points that you think are important with it.
Okay, great. So as we're looking through this interlocal, we do have a choice between keeping, our vote by mail, or if we decide to go with ranked choice voting, then we have to let them know by May 1st what we're going to do. And they did caution us that if we do decide to go with ranked choice voting, the county cannot support races involving more than 10 candidates. So if there were 10 candidates running for mayor, I mean, seems like a lot, really. We asked them how many times have we had about 10 candidates in a certain race, and I don't know if they could think of one, but that is something we have to be aware of if we decide, if you decide to go.
If I could ask a question on that, when I read that, I think Sandy had 9 candidates, which of course they found untenable. But why couldn't we in our instructions indicate that there's a maximum? The first 10 registrants will be eligible to be on the ballot versus, I mean, is it said anywhere that you have to completely open?
I think
we would have to verify that through the state.
I think that's
Lieutenant
impeding
Governor's office.
the public process and who wants to run. I think that might be a challenge, but you're right.
I mean, we end up limiting who gets on the ballot through a primary, so I don't see, a real difference. Is that something you can maybe check? You were gonna go to the governor's.
Yeah, the limiting who can apply to be on the ballot seems really surprising. It's a formatting with the software for the ranked choice.
We don't limit it to primary.
No, you don't, and I think you'd run into all kinds of trouble if you tried,
Right.
but that's a legal question for somebody else, but, we have not had here more than 10.
Yeah.
I think the most is maybe 7.
Okay. Anyways,
Not
go ahead.
Yeah. Go ahead, yeah.
Sorry,
Go
sorry.
ahead, Maria.
So if we do go with our vote by mail, then the primary would be August 15th. General election, November 7th. If we go with ranked choice voting, then that means we would probably skip the primary. And then, yes, we have costs on the back. We can go over those or they can look okay.
I think they've
I
seen.
think we have them.
All right, great.
And we'll, Mayor, correct me if I'm wrong, but we're planning on talking about the type of election at the April 18th meeting. So we'll make a decision at that point. So there'll be time where we will discuss this more fully, but tonight, what we're recommending is adoption of this agreement. It's very standard and very important. And especially the administrative side of things with the county. They have the expertise and do what they need to do with this. So
Tim, that being said, is any city, have they ever done their own without the county?
Yes.
And has that been successful?
You can do it. I mean, a small town do it.
A hand count, probably.
There's, that's certainly a small town. A lot of them will do that. It's up to recorder. At our size, it's not impossible. It's just the county offers are really good.
Yeah.
And they have all the processes in place, the facilities and the prices are really not bad.
And I'm not saying that to
Yeah.
go as an alternative, but just more, so I
Yeah, and there
know.
have been in Salt Lake County that have, but it's a little more common with smaller,
Right,
where. you
towns,
don't have
small
to-
towns, yeah.
We just have to let them know if we're going to let them help us with our election. So that's what this is.
Awesome.
If we don't pass this, Paula may not come back to work.
Just stay away.
So, Maria, that wasn't so bad, right? First time presenting here.
Here, yeah, not at all.
Yeah, and we're excited to have
Very
you part of our
nice.
staff. Maria, her
We
official
shared it
title,
earlier today.
HR manager, deputy city recorder,
Very
right?
nice.
According to Paula.
Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay, item C, staff reports is a design agreement for the Highland and Bengal intersection and the environmental design for Hawk agreements before Union and Night Drive. So, excuse me, we'll have our public works director, Matt Schiff, give some background.
There we go. Okay, I want to cover both of them there, the Hawk and this, I mean, just cover it. Okay, so what we have here is, this is the Bengal Boulevard and Highland. I've tried to highlight these. You can see in yellow. This is a federal project that we received about 5 years ago to improve this intersection for bicycle safety and pedestrian safety, and also for traffic, improving this section. Also, we applied for about 4 years ago for funding to improve or to install a multi-use trail along this red. You'll see the red here from, I forget the name of the road, Butler Hills. No, it's not Butler Hills. I can't remember the east on that. But from the red all the way down to Valere right here, to improve that section or to install a multi-use and bicycle pedestrian trail through there. So there are 2 federal aid projects, the red and the yellow. We're required to do an environmental study on that before we can move forward with design. So what we're doing is what you're reviewing as part of that is the environmental plus preliminary engineering for these 2 projects. We've managed to combine them with Wasatch Front into one project. The yellow and the red are now under one pin, as they call them, one number. The blue is a section where we received county funds. This was the one that we received a couple of months ago, where they called us on Tuesday and said, we need to know by Wednesday what you want. This is the one we've talked about that. This is that section, and it's also for a trail, pedestrian, bicycle, improvements, as well as improvement of the road and the crossing. I didn't highlight it here, but this is the, there we go. This is the school right here. So there's the crossing.
Crosswalk at the school.
Yeah, the crosswalk at the school. So what we're doing with this with this contract, although it's the first part of this project is actually on the city dime, which you've already budgeted. So we're putting all three of these projects together so we can have uniformity and a seamless project to improve. We're going for pedestrian, bicycle, traffic calming, and those types of safety features for this section of road. And that's what this contract is for.
Does environmental include for a hawk at the crosswalk?
No, it does not. We did our crossing, I mean, our federal environmental is here on the red going that direction. Now, that being said, we received a large sum. That doesn't mean we cannot do that with the county funds. That's part of what this will be, of what we can do to improve that crossing. So we will be looking into that and seeing what we can do. It would actually be cheaper than doing it on the federal dime to put it in on the county money, because we don't have to follow certain federal requirements.
Davis-Bacon.
Yes, so
Davis-Bacon.
we're in a little better
We
shape.
don't have
with
any
that.
funding in place for the hawk signal itself then there either. Is that right?
We have funding in place for the crossing. So that'll all be part of that county money.
Okay,
We'll combine that
So that-
blue section all into one. And then overall, it will be one project. So we'll try to take care of the traffic calming or the speeding, pedestrian and bicycle, as well as the intersection.
But the design, that'll be part of the design process to determine
Correct.
what is
Correct.
most appropriate and best there, which
That is
hawk would
correct.
be that determination.
And this contract will take us to about a 30% design after a few iterations to.
Matt, just to clarify, so those that are listening, that's where we put 2 lights there to
Yeah.
try to help that area. I think we've ordered the double lights sections,
Yeah.
and I don't know if they're here yet, but that will greatly enhance that area.
Those the lighting there has been,
The double heads are here, the poles aren't. So we're, yes, everything's moving forward.
It's moving forward.
Yes, but that is the location, this crosswalk at Butler Hills and Bengal for the school, correct. That's the project with Lochner Engineering.
Okay.
The second project is a federal fund that we applied for about, we just applied last year and we received the funding. But that funding, these types of fundings are usually 3 to 5 years out. They called about a few months later and said, hey, do you want to go ahead and move forward now? We said, sure, we're going to jump on it. So this has actually moved forward into this fiscal year. It's a federal aid project, so we have to do an environmental assessment. It's a city funding. Now, this is one, Scott's got it in the budget, or he'll be bringing that forward. This was not budgeted this year. It's $8,700, I believe, about $9,000 for this contract. But we have to do the environmental, and right now the environmental is in this yellow location. What the environmental does is we have to look for historic properties. If we put this thing on any property that has any historic value, we have to go through those. Even if it's 1 foot, we affect it. So there's a lot of things that go into it. We have spoken with this, or I have spoken with the school, and they're all for this project, and property, we'll need some property from them. We don't know exactly where it's going to go because there are some rules about location of hawks and where they can go if you're using federal money. But this is for that project.
perfect.
Okay?
Okay.
So 2 projects, and these are those.
hopefully won't get too far off.
And this is with Horrocks Engineering.
Awesome. Questions from the council?
If you look closely, you can see Sean barbecuing, right?
You don't see the smoke from here.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, the last item on our understaff reports is a discussion with some of the council and staff have been working on for Racket Club Drive. And we've been up there multiple times. We have a bunch of great residents up there that we're trying to help out. And so let's have our Community and Economic Development Director, Mike Johnson, or did you want to go first?
I think me first.
Okay, you first. Let's go to you first, then we'll go to Mike.
Yeah, I just want to summarize some of the points in the memo that was included in your packet. We've had a lot of meetings over time with individuals from this neighborhood on Racket Club Drive. In fact, several years ago, about 4 or 5 years ago, we met with several of the business owners as well as property or residential owners in this area and talked about some of the issues. We've funded a lot of different things. You're all aware because you were part of the study that we did on the traffic study. We've implemented some of the components of that on intersections as well as other aspects in this area. From that meeting 5 years ago, there was some signage that was placed closer up towards Fort Union on Racket Club Drive to restrict hours of parking. That was done, I think, because of some safety issues coming off of Fort Union into the neighborhood. And anyway, there'd been a request from several of the neighborhood residents to do a number of other things that I've outlined in your packet. One of the things that was suggested was basically extending the signage, the limited parking on 2 or 3 hour parking signage up Racket Club Drive on the side where you see that red line basically there. There's a vacant property that's adjacent to that will be developed most likely in the future. But until that point, and by the way, once that is developed, there's a number of different traffic and intersection issues that are going to be addressed that are going to be required as part of that development. In looking at this with the parking, Matt, as the Public Works Director and City Engineer, can make determinations based on safety issues. Based on the width and grade in this area, there isn't necessarily safety issues to make a determination to move forward with limited parking on that stretch there. But the council can provide that direction. And so that's one of the reasons why we are coming to you to see if this is something that the majority of the council would like to see in extending the signage into this area. So that's the first part of what we want to talk to you about. The second part relates to a zoning request, but I think if we can, let's talk about that
And
first.
let me add to that, Tim, as well. We met with the owners of Alpha Coffee and Porcupine to let them know that we wanted to extend the current 3 hour parking that's to the north of that red line on the same side of the road that the residents had requested if we could do the same. And what that 3 hour parking restriction would accomplish is the skiers who come and park there the entire day. And so that the entire road gets filled and they stay there the entire day. So the businesses were both in support. They said, hey, look, that would allow people could still come to our restaurant and coffee shop and park there and but they're not staying there the entire day and sometimes overnight and all of the things that the residents have struggled so much with. And so they were in full support of extending that 3 hour parking restriction up there. Anyway, I just wanted to add that.
My question is enforcement. I mean, we know that we've all had our tires chalked, before on things like that. Is that going to be more of a deterrent that would make them fear, like nobody goes and skis only 3 hours with travel time and everything?
Yeah.
Is that just, it's a deterrent?
Chief
And hopefully,
Brenneman has committed to do it himself.
is that right?
I'm on it, in between rafting on the river.
Yeah.
Yeah, as far as enforcement, that's something that we'd have to look at, obviously.
But that's always the case with everything.
Residents can help, they can call and.
Yeah, say this guy's been here for all day. Yeah.
So
What if should we consider doing some kind of cost analysis of what it would cost to put meters along there that only went for 3 hours? And in that way, if the meter expired, then the person gets a citation. As opposed to the man hours, because on these snowy mornings, that my understanding, having also met with the residents, as did the mayor, is that one of their key concerns was that cars, would stay there when the plows were needing to come through. And so the cars and vehicles were parking farther and farther toward the center line of the road. And so in a winter when we've had so much snow, this is where the residents found this untenable to have these cars that were there all day long. The plows couldn't come through. They also are very frustrated that the parking garages where there's hundreds and hundreds of parking stalls that sit empty, both underneath the Marriott and underneath this undeveloped portion of the mechanics project. That what I came to understand is that yes, this 3-hour parking is part of what they want, but what they're also interested in is to have signage that, and even possibly an island or something that gets people to realize that whether it's whoever it may be, that there's free parking located over this way, underground parking, or over in here.
Ellen, I was just up there and there's signage all over the place. From both coming in on Wasatch from farther south, there's signage that says free parking.
I mean,
There's
Wasatch is over
yeah, Wasatch, there's all over.
no,
so-
we're talking about cars that are coming this
I
way.
understand.
There's no signage here.
Yep.
And the signage that used to be over here has blown down. So there actually, to my knowledge, there is no signage in this area or over here to steer people.
One thing to mention, Councilmember Burrell, is that the owners of Alpha and Porcupine said that they would ask their employees to park in those in that public parking. So
Right.
hopefully that is happening. Hopefully that is happening.
Well, and one of the key things too is the vendors for Alpha Coffee and Porcupine find the residents that live down here find that these big vendor trucks come down and realize, oh, I can't get out onto Wasatch or Fort Union. So then they try to turn around. And again, in these winter like we're having, the residents down here complain that these vendor trucks get caught up. And that's why they were hoping for some kind of island or demarcation, because it's not just employees or not just skiers, but also these vendor trucks, that there's some.
Yeah, and that's one thing that we talked to them about in that
Uh-huh.
meeting. We asked them about that, and obviously we were just meeting with Porcupine and Alpha Coffee representatives. They contested that a little bit. They said that their vendor trucks are not the ones that are going up into that area. And so I don't know who is, there could be other businesses. But anyway, that was one of the things that they had mentioned. But as far as the signage, we are reaching out, and maybe we have with getting those signs back on the public parking signage that were put up, that were blown down, getting those back in place. And
The whole idea is to kind of prevent too many cars in these snowy days coming down here and having trouble getting turned around and back out. So my understanding from talking to the residents was they were hoping to have better facilitation of vehicles turning on to the Canyon Center Parkway.
We've talked about like you said, a little median right at that, right past that street that would
Right,
actually
like
be able
right
to
in
include a
here.
sign that said neighborhood access.
Right.
Things that would discourage people from not turning if they're, not a resident.
So
Yeah.
once that's developed, I get a quick question. Did we decide, will they have any ingress egress on that line, or is it all going to come through the lazy S road?
I'm not sure you're asking.
Where?
Okay, see where the red line is?
Yeah.
There's gonna be some buildings that are gonna be kind of against that road.
The
Would there be
apartment
a
building is
fence?
here, but the access for the parking for the apartment building is like on Racket Club or on Canyon Center Parkway.
I see. So nobody will be going in and
There's
out.
no driveway or
On
parking access from.
Well, and
Racket Club.
a concern too for the residents is with the design of this building, they don't want to have doorways into the multi-units from this street, because again, of course, with 3-hour parking, that's going to make it difficult for residents to park here, but the residents here say, well, if they, why would they take the time to go down in the parking garage if they can just go into their units from this west side? So I don't know if there's any restrictions in the architectural.
The design's approved. I don't recall off the top of my head what it landed on, but I do think there's some units that front of the racket club from a design perspective. You don't want to look at the side of a building from a public street, but
So the front doors are on.
I don't want to say that for sure because I haven't looked at the plans for a while.
Has that advanced, the
The building's
Mark,
designed and entitled, they need to submit a building permit and they haven't yet.
So let's, oh, sorry, Jen.
So what we're requesting now is direction on the limited parking signs. We haven't evaluated anything related to an island or that. There's probably some problematic things with that from snow removal on that, but it's the 3-hour parking that we're looking at and need direction from the council if we're gonna move forward.
I think
with that.
that could be a good quick help, you know what I mean? If we're escalating it, if that could definitely help. I don't think parking meters right now would be my first option at all.
Any objections, or are we
Yeah, I think
okay
it's
moving forward? Reasonable, okay. Scott, anything? Okay.
I want that, you know. You wanna be able to people get in and around the neighborhood, you wanna be able to have the public use the streets that they pay for, and yeah, parking isn't a huge. You know, that still allows for all of that to happen.
Right.
I mean, and honestly, on these really horrible snow days, if I've worked at one of those places, I'd like the covered parking.
Yeah.
So if I could go use that, it's probably worth doing.
Okay, great.
So second part then is the zoning. The property owners that we met with that day requested that the city look at some different zoning and doing a city initiated rezone. If individual property owners want to do a rezone, there's a process that we have that they have to go through an application. These individuals requested that the city look at a more general area rezone, and Mike, I'll let you walk through that.
Sure, I'm just gonna go over existing land use, which is what our long range, what the general plan says today, and then maybe I'll start with zoning today. So this is existing zoning in the area. You can see the Canyon Center itself is mixed use, but the 7-Eleven, the ski shop, Porcupine, and the office building, and then Alpha Coffee are zoned differently. Alpha Coffee is neighborhood commercial, and then everything else is regional commercial. So that's current zoning today. The general plan today shows all of this as being mixed use. So where there were a few businesses desiring interest in the city rezoning the property, for numerous reasons, it allows them some flexibility and you know, at least for Alpha Coffee and Porcupine, doesn't seem to prohibit anything that they would do with their business operations long term. This, from a city perspective, would get us closer to what our general plan says this area should be, which is mixed use. So initiating a rezone would, maybe I'll say it this way: if these properties were to come in and apply for a rezone, we would look at the general plan and say this complies, and very likely they'd get a staff recommendation of approval. So this gets closer to the right direction in accordance with our general plan. So it would be a council decision on whether to initiate this from a city standpoint or whether to have them apply.
Was this included in the other general plan, the other amendment we did further down from 27th, or the 27th up to 30th east and stopped?
I don't know where it stopped, but it didn't come up this
It
far.
didn't come this far.
No, because most of those changes were from residential office down to
I
residential.
was gonna say, if we've already dealt with this 2 years ago, then I'm a lot less inclined. but
It
if
didn't
this
come
is-
up this far.
This didn't come this far.
No.
Wait, I'm a little confused with this. Didn't you just say that the existing land use was neighborhood commercial and regional commercial?
Existing zoning.
Okay,
So the laws as they apply today, that's zoning, that's neighborhood commercial and regional commercial. The general plan, what our policy says we want this area to be, is mixed use, but that is not the zoning today. So the city initiating this would change the actual zoning here from regional commercial and neighborhood commercial to mixed use. And that would go through the planning commission public hearing process and then come back to council for formal consideration.
that would typically be considered an up zone from neighborhood commercial or more intense, and a down zone or at least lesser intense from regional commercial from at least what's permitted.
Kind of, it's a little bit of a parallel move for regional commercial. Neighborhood commercial is,
I know it's not big enough for a Costco, but that's what's allowed in regional commercial.
it gives a little bit more flexibility with building setbacks, a wider variety of uses. You do have to mix uses.
Gasoline's permitted and mixed.
It is, I think it's a conditional use in mixed use, but we did check on that. Part of this is if we get the go ahead, we would go talk to, we've talked to Alpha and Porcupine, we'd go talk to the ski shop and 7-Eleven. Let them know before they get a notice saying.
So Mike, what's the objective to this ultimately?
This was brought up in the meeting we had with Alpha Coffee and Porcupine. I know Alpha Coffee is interested in doing some patio expansions and some business expansions, and there's some weird setback things with neighborhood commercial that prevent them from doing that. So that was probably their interest. Porcupine was supportive of it. So coming out of that meeting, I think the consensus was, well, let's take this to council and see. If
I
that's
think
something
there,
they're
I think
interested
the bill is that there's a consistency to those 5 parcels, you know. And so I think I would be in favor of moving forward with a city initiated rezone here.
Would that affect, would that affect any of the neighbors that are close by in a negative way?
That's what I was just gonna say. It seems with, on the west side, they're specifically going to something that's potentially, I mean, I guess I'd have to see what the setbacks and the changes and everything are, because typically you're trying to keep it less intense next when you're on backyards.
There are some standards in mixed use where you're adjacent to residential, your setbacks have to be greater. I'm gonna guess the Alpha Coffee building today is already closer than you could be in both neighborhood commercial and mixed use. So if there was a brand new redevelopment there, the setbacks would have to be much greater regardless of zoning.
What about height?
It should be
The same base level of 35 feet is permitted. In mixed use, you can apply conditionally to increase the height by 1 story, the 3rd story.
That's
So
what
we
I was
actually
gonna-
calls a story.
It says a story, it doesn't say how many feet that is, but you can add a 3rd
We
story.
need to fix that,
That's up to you.
probably.
We could do that same time, you know.
We got burned with my stories a long time ago, so I like feet's a whole lot less.
Some stories are longer than other stories.
Councilmember Newell.
Yeah, I was gonna say, just to be bad cop, so what if there's a developer comes in, buys up that mixed use area, puts in a hotel because of the view? Is that something that everybody's willing to live with as well?
Well, you can do that in mixed use, but apparently you cannot do that in regional commercial,
Exactly, that's what I said, if we do. the
which is
mixed use.
why the other part is mixed use.
So there's already a
They-
hotel on that corner, which I wouldn't think would be the most awful thing to the height, like we could keep as the council, the height the same as there
Mhm.
is allowed right now. But I think that's a good question.
Yeah, cause I mean, 10-15 years from now, who knows?
If that door is open, what Sean's saying,
Mhm.
that could be.
I mean,
It could
this
be
is the
whatever.
task, it's time. My staff to get it, it's time on the planning commission and the noticing and everything like that.
Now-
The question is, are we willing to spend that?
Theoretically, the council could say, yeah, let's go forward and initiate the process. And if you get a lot of public feedback that gives you concern, you still have to vote on this at the end of the process. Even though the city's initiating it, you can vote yes or no.
We could also change the mixed use designation of an extra level, right?
Yeah,
That's
it's
a text amendment, which is,
text now, it's a
it can be run
legislative-
simultaneously.
Which I have also recommended on the neighborhood commercial. I think that's some of the things that have happened recently has brought a couple concerns with the neighborhood commercial zone itself, and it would, I mean, I'd certainly be interested in looking at the neighborhood commercial to just better define some of the density setbacks and other requirements in that. Because that affects a couple of other places in the city.
And so, just to be clear, Alpha Coffee is the only one that's brought this up, or the other?
The meeting was with Alpha Coffee and Porcupine, who actually has the office building and the restaurant.
Oh, do they do both?
Yeah, they have, so 3 of the 5 buildings there.
So that's more of a mix in that rather than Alpha, right?
Yeah, it wasn't just Alpha.
I was surprised we had regional commercial. I thought the whole batch got rezoned.
Yeah, the other option is just let them do it on their own when they're ready, instead of doing a city initiated one. That's the other option.
So they would apply for some kind of a variance.
Just a zone.
They'd apply for a zone change, yeah.
Well, the other
Property
thing
by property.
I want to go on record is that I believe that it would be advantageous to come up with a form-based code for this area that reflects streetscape and elements of mobility as well as the buildings within the actual parcels there.
So what do you think? Do you want to revisit this?
Yeah, can we come back in the 2 or 3 weeks? I've got a couple questions. Maybe I can ask Mike offline. That would be maybe give me a better idea what to do. I'm not greatly opposed to it, but there are a couple of concerns in there.
Nope, that's completely understandable. We'll hold off on that. For a second
I know that
and we'll
this excites
revisit it.
Mr. Johnson to no end and know that I'll be calling. No.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. Item 5, item 4, this is just a review of calendars and upcoming events. February 15th to May 31st is the continuation of the Cottonwood Heights Children's Choir rehearsals that are held weekly on Wednesdays, free ongoing registration for grades 3 to 6. April 8th is the city Easter egg hunt at Butler Park at 10 a.m. April 17th from 6:30 to 7:30, the Aspen Winds Family Concert during the backyard shenanigans at City Hall. There, right here. April 22nd from 9 to noon. Councilmember Newell and Chief Brenneman are supportive of the Cottonwood Heights Shakeout, and we're hoping that all of our residents will participate in that great event to help us be prepared. June 2nd from 9 to 1 is a free shredding event here at City Hall. People with personal items that they don't want to put in recycling bins are more than welcome to bring them here, and we'll get them shredded for them at no cost. And of course, July 27th to the 29th, Cottonwood Heights Butlerville Days. We need volunteers and sponsors, and you can go to butlervilledays.com or call Ann Mitchell. Okay, we do not have a closed session scheduled for today in our work session. So I will accept a motion to close our work session and enter into our scheduled 5:30 CDRA meeting.
Can I make one comment that I
Yes.
didn't realize I needed to earlier? I actually had made a couple of comments on the document for the minutes for our retreat. I never got a response back. I found out they're still kind of sitting in there on a place, but I don't think Paul has had a chance to look at those. So maybe on the consent calendar, can we do them all but the retreat and get a response from her once she gets back?
Yeah, because I've seen
You saw those. I just
did.
don't, I have just no idea if they're actually.
We'll pull
in
out
there
the
yet.
retreat minutes. Yep. Thank you for bringing that up.
So you want adjourn our work session and
Yes,
start our CDRA meeting?
yes.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second that.
Great. Motion to approve and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
You may just need to wait 10
We're
minutes.
adjourned, and we got a 10-minute break.
Free
before,
free time.
Yeah.
I move that Doug has free time to move.
So we just, for anybody who's here as well, the CRA meeting is going to immediately move into a closed session if approved by the council. So, yeah.
I will work on making sure any comments I have on minutes are responded to in a different manner.